Hello, my name is Julia Liebers and I am a student at De Anza College in Cupertino, and today my presentation is on environmental ethics. Environmental ethics can be defined as a philosophy that studies humans and their moral relationship between the biotic and abiotic aspects of the environment. Environmental ethics really started to develop in the 1960s and 70s. This was because of an increasing awareness of industrial growth, economic growth, and population growth, and the effect it's had on the environment. When environmental ethics emerged as a new philosophy, it challenged traditional views. It questioned the assumed moral superiority of human beings to members of other species on Earth. It also investigated the possibility of assigning value to the natural environment and its non-human components. Standard policy approaches today consider two pressing global environmental problems: climate change and biodiversity loss. Two factors that play into contrasting beliefs of environmental ethics are intrinsic value and instrumental value. Intrinsic value is the value that an entity has in itself, for what it is or as an end. When you think of intrinsic value, think of the sentimental value it brings, like friendship or love. Many people value species and ecosystems intrinsically, for their complexity, diversity, spiritual significance, wildness, beauty, or wondrousness. Instrumental value is the value that something has as a means to a desired or valued end. Instrumental value is always derivative on the value of something else, and it is always conditional. A good example of something that would have intrinsic value would be money. Money physically is just a piece of paper, but when you add instrumental value to it, it becomes a major social and economic tool. The three main types of ethics we see today are anthropocentrism, biocentrism, and ecocentrism. Anthropocentrism is the view that only human interest needs to be taken into account. Many traditional Western ethical perspectives are anthropocentric and assign a significantly greater amount of intrinsic value to human beings than any non-human beings. They justify the protection of human interests and well-being at the expense of non-human things. Biocentrism is the ethical perspective that all living organisms should be considered as equals. Critics highlight that strictly biocentric ethics will conflict with a more ecological influenced environment. Protecting individual lives may lead to harm, rather than protecting the integrity of ecosystems. The evidence given by critics is that there is a need to remove invasive species for ecosystem health. It is, of course, always open for the biocentric approach to accept the conflict by simply denying the value of ecological wholes and shifting the focus of biocentrism to have only incidentally overlapping concerns with environmental ethics. The last environmental ethic is ecocentrism. Ecocentrism is the understanding that ecological groups such as ecosystems, habitats, species, and populations are all part of an environmental concern. This approach determines that preserving the integrity of the ecosystems and the survival of species and populations is environmentally more crucial than protecting the lives of individual elements of an ecosystem or members of a species. Ecocentric environmental ethics often would overlook destroying the lives of individuals as a legitimate means of preserving ecology as a whole. So members of an overpopulated herd or killing an invasive non-native plant or animal species can be justified. There has always been a large debate discussing what is legal and ethical in regard to politics and the environment. The emergence of philosophies to underpin animal rights activism and the puzzles over whether an environmental ethic would be something new rather than a modification or extension of existing ethical theories were reflected in wider social and political movements. The rise of environmental or green parties in Europe in the 1980s was accompanied by almost immediate clash between groups known as the realists versus fundamentalists. The realists stood for reform environmentalism, working with businesses and government to soften the impact of pollution and resource depletion, especially on fragile ecosystems or endangered species. The fundamentalists argued for radical change, the setting of stringent new priorities, and even the overthrow of capitalism and liberal individualism, which were taken as the major ideological causes of anthropogenic environmental devastation. Deep ecology is a somewhat recent branch of ecological philosophy that considers humankind as an integral part of its environment. The philosophy emphasizes the interdependent value of human and non-human life, as well as the importance of the ecosystem and natural processes it provides. It provides a foundation for the environmental and green movements and has led to a new system of environmental ethics. In 1960s, having read Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring, Arne Naess was moved to apply his formidable philosophical skills to understanding the ecological crisis and its resolution. Since becoming the youngest ever professor of philosophy at the University of Oslo while still in his 20s, Naess has revealed his brilliance by studying and writing extensively in many fields, including semantics, philosophy of science, and the works of Spinoza and Gandhi. His approach to ecology bears the stamp of his life's experience as a philosopher in the truest sense, and it shows in his role in the development of deep ecology and the coining of the phrase. The Deep Ecology Platform. Naess and George Sessions both developed 8 guidelines to practicing deep ecology, and they are called the Deep Ecology Platform. The well-being and flourishing of human and non-human life on Earth have value in themselves. These values are independent of usefulness of the non-human world for human purposes. Richness and diversity of life forms contribute to the realization of these values and are also values in themselves. Humans have no right to reduce this richness and diversity except to satisfy vital needs. Present human interference with the non-human world is excessive and the situation is rapidly worsening. The flourishing of human life and culture is compatible with the substantial decrease of the human population. The flourishing of non-human life requires such a decrease. Policies must therefore be changed. The changes in policies affect basic economic, technologic, and ideologic structures. The resulting state of affairs will be deeply different from the present. The ideologic change is mainly that of appreciating life quality, rather than adhering to an increasing higher standard of living. There will be a profound awareness of the difference between big and great. Those who subscribe to the foregoing points have an obligation directly or indirectly to participate in the attempt to implement the necessary changes. Deep experience is often what gets a person started along a deep ecological path. Another founder of deep ecology is Aldo Leopold. In his book, A Sand County Almanac, he provides a striking example of how experience can bring forth important life-changing realizations. For Leopold, the experience was of a sufficiently intensity to trigger a total reorientation in his life's work as a wildlife manager and ecologist. In the 1920s, he had been appointed by the U.S. government to develop a rational scientific policy for eradicating the wolf from the entire United States. The justification for this intervention was that wolves compete with sport hunters for deer, so that fewer wolves would mean more deer for hunters. As a wildlife manager of those times, Leopold still held to the unquestioning belief that humans were superior to the rest of nature and were thus morally justified in manipulating it as much as was required to maximize human welfare. One morning, Leopold was out with some friends on a walk in the mountains. Being hunters, they carried their rifles with them, in case they got a chance to kill some wolves. It got to around lunchtime, and they sat down on a cliff overlooking a turbulent river. Soon they saw what appeared to be some deer fording at the torrent, but they soon realized that it was a pack of wolves. They took up their rifles and began to shoot excitedly into the pack, but with little accuracy. Eventually, an old wolf was down by the side of the river, and Leopold rushed down to gloat at her death. What met him was a fierce green fire dying in the wolf's eyes. He writes in a chapter entitled Thinking Like a Mountain that there was something new to me in those eyes, something known only to her and to the mountain. I thought because fewer wolves meant more deer that no wolves would mean hunter's paradise. But after seeing the green fire die, I sensed that neither the wolf nor the mountain agreed with such a view. This compelling story really paints a picture of how Leopold was influenced by this experience and how it changed his mind about the environment and our ethical obligations as humans. Some food for thought. Do we as humans deserve to be at the top of the food chain? Do all living things and non-living things have a role as equals? Or should we all coexist naturally to preserve the environment? The choice is yours to make. Thank you for watching.